done and you already know that day too, like there's no way, there's nowhere else to grow. You're either
Mm-hmm.
going to have to, like you said, wait for someone to leave,
Mm-hmm.
or you leave, go
Right.
somewhere else. So yeah, that's a little,
I mean, obviously, I mean, a lot of times when people want to move up, like, well, we can't promote you because the person above you isn't going anywhere.
right, right. And so, yeah. But that's one thing we don't have here. I mean, we have a pretty strong promotional track program built in to
Mm-hmm.
various positions, especially the ones we're going to talk about today. So
Mm-hmm.
that'll be nice. And with us, you just have to be in your position for 6 months and then you can transfer anywhere. I mean, as
Wow.
long as you qualify,
Wow.
feel free. Yeah. So it's 6 o'clock.
All right. We are live on Facebook. Now, this is always like, okay, people, you signed up, please join us.
Yeah, but last minute things come up or people forget.
Yeah. All right. We are live. So let's give people a few more minutes. Well, we have to right now.
Yeah.
Um, I see somebody else joining. No, we have an attendee. Okay. All right. So we do have, all right, people are coming in. Okay, good.
Yeah, I see the numbers. We're at 2 and climbing.
Timing. Yeah.
Yep,
Well,
yep, yep.
it is 6 o'clock. So we'll give people a few more minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, the nice thing right now is everything's virtual and at least we're still able to hire people and
Mhm.
educate them virtually, but it's not like everything's completely shut down. So we're grateful for
Right.
what we can work with.
Do you work out of the Thompson Center?
No, I'm on 401 Clinton Street,
Okay.
or more towards the Union Station.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So it's
that's
close, convenient,
it's very convenient. Yes.
very convenient. It's just the train, they're just not fast enough. It's like you want to get home right away, but see, I live in Elgin, so it's about an hour commute each
Ah.
way.
Oh,
But, I don't mind it because I can catch up on the computer, on
true.
email and stuff. But,
Yeah, that's the best part of not driving because you can relax,
mm-hmm,
you can chill.
yeah, yep, just watch people. That's always fun. So it's never a dull moment. You can nap,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Is there an express metro?
There is, yeah.
Mm,
You just have to make sure it coordinates with your, start time and end time.
right.
But for the most part, every 30 minutes or to an hour, there's a train leaving. So if you miss one, no worries. So just
Mm-hmm.
jump on the next.
All right. We have a couple of attendees right now. I'm sure you can hear us. We're gonna give people a few more minutes before we start. So hang tight.
And the whole virtual uh, experience, it's been a little challenging because not everyone's used to connecting via Zoom or WebEx. I know I've had some issues with the college fairs where it takes the person longer to log on
Mm,
then it just gives you like 2, 3 minutes to talk to the student, but it took them 5 minutes to jump on the virtual session.
mm-hmm.
So, I get it. But I think with what's going on right now, there are definitely going to be more people working from home
Yeah,
regularly, even when we're called back. This has been a learning and, no experience, but a lot can, people can get a lot done from home, I tell you.
absolutely. I mean, it's not the same, but it can be done.
Yeah. And then you'll just share the screen with me and then I'll
Uh,
present my slides.
yeah. Let Jay know. I think you should be able to do it yourself.
Yeah, it says here share screen, so I could probably, yeah, once we're ready, let me try it. Should I try it just to test it?
Sure.
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing. I guess it has to be enabled. I can email you the presentation too. Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It works. All right, I'm going to exit out. Perfect. Thank you.
Shall we start?
I'm ready when you are.
You are? Okay. We're going to start now. So welcome everybody to B3, which is Build, Believe, Breakthrough, in which order? It's hosted by OCA Greater Chicago, a local chapter of OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocates, which was previously known as the Organization of Chinese Americans. OCA is a nonprofit organization founded in 1973, the mission of which is to advance the social, political, and economic well-being of Asian Pacific Americans in the United States. It is headquartered in Washington, D.C., and the goals are to advocate for social justice, equal opportunity, and fair treatment, promote civic participation, education, and leadership, advance coalitions and community building, and foster cultural heritage. Originally created as a Chinese American organization, it now includes members from many Asian and non-Asian ethnicities. We in the Greater Chicago area, we focus on professional and leadership development and is dedicated to promoting the economic, professional, and social well-being of AAPIs in the Greater Chicago area. Our main speaker is going to be Dr. Rahul Sharma, who will be joining us a little bit later. But in the meantime, I'm actually very honored to have Amelia Gavina from the Illinois Department of Human Services. She's the manager of recruiting, and she's going to give us a brief overview to career opportunities with the Illinois Department of Human Services. So Amelia, out to you.
Okay. Here we go. Sorry, I had my mic on mute. All right, can you hear me? Perfect. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time. As Mabel mentioned, I'm going to give you a brief overview, and we're going to cover basically give you a little bit of information as far as what the Illinois Department of Human Services does, as well as talk about some of the benefits, our application process, and our high need areas. So we'll get started. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. So the Illinois Department of Human Services is the largest state agency. We are at about 14,000 employees, and we have 5 divisions under the Department of Human Services. The Division of Developmental Disability, and we have 7 developmental centers that fall under this division. The Division of Family and Community Services, which manages like the WIC program, Medicaid, SNAP, cash assistance, and provides family in needs access to affordable childcare. We have our Division of Mental Health. We have 7 hospitals statewide. 2 of those hospitals have a forensic unit. We also have the Division of Rehabilitation Services. Uh, we have Under the Division of Rehabilitation Services, we have 45 offices and 3 schools for the deaf and the visually impaired. And then we have the Division of Substance Use Prevention and Recovery. And we don't provide direct services under this division. However, we fund about 1,000 programs that provide preventative intervention, treatment, and recovery services to our clients. As far as benefits, these are great reasons to work with the Department of Human Services. We have an excellent benefit package that includes sick personal vacation time. Our work week is 37.5 hours versus 40. We have a tuition reimbursement program as well. And if you work with the state, you qualify for a loan forgiveness eligibility program, which after a certain number of years of continuing to pay your student loans, making your monthly payments on time, then you would qualify for having that balance forgiven, which is great. Also, we offer a great benefit is that if you work 20 years with our agency, you can retire after 20 years of service and start collecting a pension. So that's always nice. All right. And then as far as the application process, I just want to give you a quick overview. Sometimes I get feedback where people just feel like the process is too long. They don't really understand it. And sometimes it could be discouraging and people get the sense that it's impossible to get a job with the state. And that is not true. So as far as the application process, anytime a position becomes available, the first thing we do is post the vacancy on the work.illinois.gov website, and that website will be included in a later slide. So the first thing we do is post the position, typically for 14 days. 10 business days plus the 2 weekends. So you can only apply for jobs with the state if there is an active posting. So that's where you want to start. Again, work.illinois.gov. Once you identify the position you're interested in, you will complete a CMS 100 employment application. Now, one thing you should know is when you're reading a job posting, be very or pay attention to the title and the application window. If you miss the application window, unfortunately, we cannot accept that application. Once you submit your application, it goes to Springfield where they will grade your application. And they're grading your application based on your background, your experience, your education, and how that compares to the job posting. So that's one way of receiving a grade from the state. Now, there's 2 types of exam. One is you literally sit in front of a computer and complete a multiple choice exam at one of our testing centers. And the other way of getting a grade is where we are literally grading your employment application and comparing it to the job posting. As far as knowing which grading process you will follow, it just depends on the position that you're applying to. So once we receive your application, we will grade it and we will mail you a grade notice in the mail. You could either get an A, a B, or a C, or fail. Regardless, you will receive some kind of notice telling you where you stand. As positions become available in the counties where you want to work, those offices will reach out to human resources, and then HR will then go and consult the eligibility to hire list. So if you got an A, which your goal should be is to qualify for an A, then you're going to be called first before the individuals who get a B, before the individuals that get a C. In some cases, we'll never call the C grade because we have enough interest on the A list and the B list. So if you submit your application and you received a grade notice and it's a C and you really, we're hoping for an A, which you really should be, then you could appeal your grade if maybe there's additional experience or education that you did not include on your original application. So you can certainly appeal and resubmit your application, but you will have to well, never mind. I'm not even going to go down that road. But again, you can appeal. So your goal is to get an A, but regardless, if you get an A, B, or C, you are still qualified to get on our eligible to hire list. So once there's a need, we will contact you. Human Resources will either contact you to offer you the job or to schedule an interview. That just depends on the position that you've applied for. And then after the interview process, or if you accept the offer, then we'll talk about a start date, and voila, you're employed. So there you go. That's just a quick high overview of our hiring process. Now, as far as the high need areas, I would say these four are positions that exist in all of our divisions. So we have the social services career trainee, which requires at least a bachelor's. Then we have the rehabilitation counselor, social worker, and psychologist, which again, the last three titles require minimum of a master's degree. So the social services career trainee, you have to start as a trainee, and you're in that position for 6 months. We're training you on the various programs that and services that the Department of Human Services offers. And as you're learning those programs, 6 months later, there's a nice promotional track in place for this position where 6 months later you can promote up to a social services caseworker. So at that point, you're doing a lot of intake, you're meeting with clients, you're assessing their case, you're giving and again, I just want to reiterate, the Department of Human Services have very strong promotional track programs in place for these positions. So the rehabilitation counselor, this position requires a master's, and you can start as a trainee, which requires no experience, work your way up to a rehab counselor after 1 year of experience, and then work as a rehab counselor senior. At that point, you're more in a leadership position, and that specific title would require 3 years. Social workers, we hire social workers again in all of our divisions. We have the social worker one with no experience. All of the social workers, again, require at least a minimum of a master's. So you'll see as you gain experience, you can climb up on our promotional, through our promotional track program. And finally, psychologist. Again, we hire psychologists at all of our divisions. The psychologist position requires at least a master's. As you can see, if you have more than a master's, if you have a doctoral degree, you certainly will qualify for the higher level positions and will not need as much experience. Now, as far as if you have an interest, we have a recruitment team, and basically we are paid to educate you on the various opportunities available within the agency and to walk you and guide you through the application process. Our email address is listed on this slide, DHS Recruitment Team. If you have any questions as far as what positions may be open, what you may qualify for, how to apply, who to send your application to, we can support you. We take pride in responding to our customers within 24 to 48 hours, usually more like 24 hours. So definitely reach out to the team. That's what we're here for. And then if you want to learn what vacancies are available, definitely you want to log on to www.work.illinois.gov and create a search. And depending on what category position you're interested, if it's medical, it could be if you accounting, technical. So you'll just narrow down the search by the category, the type of position that you're interested in, the county that you want to work in, and then you can select the agency that you would want to work in, and the system will populate results of positions that meet the three categorical preferences that you selected. So that is my spiel as far as the Department of Human Services. I don't know if there are questions that I can answer.
I'm not seeing any in the Q&A box, but I do have one question.
Sure.
As you mentioned, most of the positions require a master's degree. How does licensure affect employment? Is it required? Is it encouraged, or it doesn't really matter? Or
It
how does
just
that
depends.
work?
I will tell you, it depends on the position. When you're reading a posting, sometimes it'll say, a master's degree or equivalent experience. So if the posting reads in that way, if you have, let's say 4 years of experience, then we would certainly look at your application and process it for that position. However, we have postings that say master's degree required. If you see the word required, you have to have it at the time that you submit your application. So words matter, and it just depends on how the posting reads.
So if it says required, but like somebody has completed their master's degree, they're working on their clinical hours, so they will be eligible, but they're not eligible yet.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
So they have to be, if it says required, they have to have the licensure at the time of application, not
Yes.
not wait until like 8 months later when you call them.
No, I know. Yeah, you have to meet the requirements by the time you submit your application. Now, here's the other piece. Some of these positions that I reviewed today, not all of them require licensure. As long as you have the degree, you may qualify for some of these positions. Again, it just depends on how the requirements are listed on the posting.
Can you give us an example? Like, for example, the social worker, like what type of job duties and responsibilities will there be, and what type of population will they be working with?
Absolutely. Okay, okay, so social workers. I mean, they're working with our rehab facility within our disability development division, as well as our mental health. They are, and I'm just reading a little bit from the posting, they're working with social workers. They engage in treatment, rehabilitation of emotional disturbed, mentally ill, developmentally disabled, or other disabled individuals by persons formerly trained in social work position. This position includes, they're doing case management. They provide therapeutic social services, and or provide leadership to professional engaged in treatment and rehabilitation activities. So they're working with, disabled children, disabled adults, um, and again, it could be mentally ill clients, developmentally disabled clients as well.
So do these tend to be office visits, home visits, hospitals?
It would be any type of visit within the facilities under our agency. So in some cases, it could be home visits, it could be hospital, other clinical setting facility visits as well, in person. Maybe someone lives at home but visits one of our agencies for services. So it's a nice variety depending on what you're looking for and what you're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And that's the nice thing about working for the Department of Human Services. We're so large that if you're looking for a different setting or a different level of position, those opportunities always exist. Any other questions?
Are there any questions from the attendees? Not seeing anything. Just to give our attendees an idea, I mean, this is a very brief overview, and I definitely want to thank Amelia for joining us today. We will have a more in-depth presentation on November 6th, starting at 2 p.m. You can go to our Facebook page, OCA Chicago, and sign up. That way you get a little bit more information on the career opportunities, how to apply, and you can definitely ask more questions that way. But as Amelia said, there are a lot of jobs out there, and it's human services. We're never going to go away because a lot of people do require services in a lot of different settings. Like you said, mental health, residential, developmental disability. So if you are interested, join us again on November 6th, or send us an email, send us a text, and we'd be more than happy to put you in touch with DHS.
Yes, definitely. And we'll review the application as well in the different sections and give you, tips on how to complete the employment application as well. So definitely more detailed for sure on November 6th.
So I'm going to sure people are aware how to get a hold of us. You can email us at info@ocachicago.org. Oops. And also on social media, we are on OCA Chicago. So send us an email if you have questions, or follow us, especially on Facebook, where we post a lot of opportunities, articles, obviously. And also you can sign up for the presentation on the 6th. It's going to be at 2 p.m. It is during the day, but it is going to be from 2 to 3. And that way, if you want to learn more, you certainly are more than welcome to join us. Because hopefully we have enough information for you to get a feel of what is available. Like we said, the jobs are there. There are hundreds of them in a lot of different departments and a lot of different types of opportunities. Today's event was set up specifically for students of psychology, but also social work, counseling, human services, especially now when in these uncertain times, we talk a lot about mental health awareness, but in order for people to seek help, we need the workers, we need helpers. So definitely we need to make sure that you are aware, if you are interested, what opportunities are there. And I see Rahul just joined us, and hello. And Rahul will talk a little bit more. So welcome to Rahul, who is our main speaker today. So let me kind of give a brief introduction to our main speaker. So give me another 5 minutes to read this. It's a long bio.
You don't have to read the whole thing.
I am going to read the whole thing. I practiced. But Rahul and I have known each other for over 25 years. It's been a long time.
I know.
Yeah, so here we go. So Dr. Rahul Sharma is a consultant, psychologist, musician, and speaker with expertise in diversity, social justice, multiculturalism, emotional intelligence, leadership, individual and community health, violence against women prevention, music, and wellness. As consultant, Dr. Sharma recently founded Strategic Inclusion Consulting, LLC. He recently partnered with a Chicago-based university theater department to train and coach students, faculty, and administration around skill building related to diversity, leadership, and conflict resolution. Previously, he trained Evanston's 180-member police department on mental health response, integrating diversity and communities' concerns. Recent engagements include being an invited speaker to the Diversity Challenge, opening keynote presenter at the annual Illinois Psychological Association Convention, and keynote presenter at the National Council on Schools of Professional Psychology. I can't talk anymore. All right, I guess I'm going to stop reading after all.
Yeah, I'm telling you, don't bore everybody. I was falling
what
asleep.
well, you wrote it.
Exactly.
What I want to do is for us to get to learn from somebody who's been in the field for quite a while now on what types of opportunities there are in terms of like different settings and different populations, because when we think psychology, we think maybe mental health, which is obviously a major part, but there's also wellness. There's also actually even in corporate settings. So there's a lot that somebody who's studying psychology can think of. Like, for example, I'll give you an idea. I work for a social service agency that works primarily, actually exclusively, with people with severe and chronic mental illness. But I've also worked in student counseling. I've worked in with court services. So it's not just mental illness, but also wellness, diversity training. So there's a lot of those that is possible. So that's one of the things that I want to do today is to kind of have Rahul talk a little bit about what he does and what he has done with his career and with his degree. So Rahul, can you give us a little bit of
Sure.
into
Well,
that?
thank you. And first of all, my great, wonderful gratitude to Mabel. Yes, we have known each other for so long. In fact, I don't know if you mentioned this, but we happened to be there for the Chicago School of Professional Psychology photo shoot one year. So there's one, the cover of one of the brochures for one of the years. Oh, it must have been like 95 or something,
I think I can
96.
pull it up. We were
Oh my
so young.
gosh. But we were like sitting there and they're like, just talk to each other. And so it's like Mabel and me and someone else, and we're all like this, like talking to each other. It was kind of funny. But so thank you. I'm very grateful. I don't know if we have chat enabled for the participants, but I welcome your questions. And even if you want to, I don't know if people can get off mute and ask anything, happy to make this as interactive as possible. Don't get me wrong, I can talk at the drop of a hat, but I would rather my words be really sort of speaking to some of what might be of interest to you. But to Mabel's point, I think maybe just to get started, yes, there are so many ways to apply the science and practice of psychology. And definitely the most obvious is in mental health settings. But to your point, Mabel, I think wellness, a variety of things that I'm seeing happening in corporate settings. I made a shift. I was teaching for 13 plus years at the Illinois School of Professional Psychology, where I was coordinating the diversity concentration. And so a lot of my focus for many years has been on training doctoral level students. But there's so much. I got a chance to teach a consultation in diverse settings course, and there's so much of the kinds of skills that we develop as psychologists that can and should be applied. We might just need to pay attention to how that fit might happen, because I think even to seasoned colleagues that are trained in clinical psychology, the idea of consulting is alluring, but also elusive or scary, or how do you make that shift? And if you just maybe, if you're fortunate enough to shadow with somebody or just have conversations, take someone out to coffee that is applying psychology in a variety of settings, it's not that hard to figure out what is it that I might be able to have to offer that is needed out there. And I will tell you, in corporate settings alone, I don't know of any agency, if they're really thinking about taking care of their employees during COVID and post-COVID, I don't know. I can't even imagine the amount of need there is out there for folks like, to apply their mental health background. Um, when I made the move from being a teacher to being a full-time consultant and really applying what I'm doing in a variety of ways, the thing I'd hear over and over again as a consultant is, "Oh my gosh, you have a mental health background. That's going to set you over the top. Oh my gosh, you have a mental health background. Oh my gosh, we need that at our organization." So being able to maybe take a psychoeducation approach, which is just take aspects of the science of psychology, wellness. So there, I mean, and even that is so vast, but relational health, communication, assertiveness skills, uh, down the line, stress management. People are hungry for this kind of knowledge. So I'm always a big fan of figuring out what the need is, you know. My favorite question, and I even asked this of Mabel in advance of this talk. I'll ask this to anybody that's bringing me in for a training, bringing me in for a whole strategic consulting, where I'm doing coaching and training and speaking and all of this. I will ask the people that are inviting me in advance, maybe a couple weeks in advance. This engagement will have been a success if blank, and I'd have them fill in the blank. And I'd say 8 times out of 10 people are like, "Oh my gosh, that's a great question." So even the basics of what we're taught in psychology about how to listen and how to take what we hear from people, the qualitative information, just whatever it is, the narrative that people are sharing, to take it as data and to show that we've paid attention to it and we're responding to it. To me, as somebody that has been trained in this field, that's just a given. But it's pretty revolutionary for everyday society for folks to be like, "Oh my gosh, this person really paid attention." Or even if I'm in a meeting and I'm just reflecting back what somebody said, or I just want to summarize what I think I heard you say and I want to make sure I get it right. You do that, and if you do that in any setting, people really appreciate your desire to really want to understand and to have assembly. And this is, to me, this is a clinical skill that translates beyond clinical work, is to have enough humility to say, I might not have understood this correctly. What's most important is that I fully understand what it is that you're saying. So anyway, those are a couple of things off the top of my head. Um, and again, you can do this in corporate settings. You can do this by maybe even starting. And I don't know how many folks here are undergrads, how many folks are in grad school, or maybe even high school. I don't know. But to me, even before becoming a psychologist, I really started doing doing workshops on a college campus. And in this case, my training and background before going to grad school was at a sexual assault prevention center at the University of Michigan. And to be in that environment and to learn how to stand in front of a group of strangers and engage with them around a topic that a lot of people maybe didn't want to talk about. Maybe there was resistance, there was a lot of reactions, but to be given the tools to be able to stand there and do exercises and workshops, activities that were engaging. Sometimes they were fun, sometimes they were intense, but to be able to hold a space like that, I believe is so valuable. So what I'm trying to say is, no matter where you are now, think about an area of interest and think about maybe partnering with a more seasoned supervisor or faculty member or agency program, facilitator or whatever, and co-lead a workshop. Get some experience co-leading a workshop or a psychoeducation, stress management 101. Because I feel like even before becoming a psychologist, that put me in a position to better succeed. Is how do you facilitate? How do you stand in front of a room full of people and get them engaged on a topic? So again, I can go in a million different directions, but I want to pause to both check in with Mabel and also check in with, anybody if they have any questions or areas that you want me to particularly cover.
Yeah, definitely. When you're talking about like different work settings, it doesn't have to be in a clinical setting. I mean, even if in a corporate environment, you need to have a good understanding of people, how to motivate them,
Mm-hmm.
what are their strengths and weaknesses, how do you get them to do their best. I mean, those are some of the skills that are just as important regardless of what type of setting that is. Let me go a little bit more personal now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you mentioned why you chose psychology. Do you want to
Oh,
give us an idea of like why psychology?
that's a great question. So by the time I was doing the work at the Sexual Assault Prevention Center, at first I was a peer educator, so I got the 40 hours of training, and then I took a staff position as an undergrad. I was working 20 hours a week, co-coordinating the peer education program, and I was all in. It was pretty significant for my undergrad time. Um, that oriented me towards something in the helping professions. And so I had narrowed it down at that time between psychology and social work. And I I I think I really just was captured by using my my personality, my way of responding, my way of asking questions, my desire to really help people, my desire to sort of maximize people's potential. I think that because those were passions of mine, that helped shape my interest in the field.
So you are now a consultant. Like how did what made you decide to go in that direction?
uh I had been about 4 years. I've always been intrigued by consulting work. um I For about 4 years, um the last 4 years of my teaching, I kept scratching at it, saying, but again, to me, it was also very, scary and elusive, and this would be a big leap. And, but I kept saying to myself, and I kept telling my partner, I'm married and I have two teenage children. And I kept telling my partner, I think I want to be a consultant, but of course, the idea of moving from the safety net of a full-time position, you have your income and all of this, to sort of going out completely on your own was a daunting, idea. But I kept scratching at it and saying I want to do this. So um and now that I've done, I think it was basically since March 2019. So I've been a full-time consultant only a year and a half now. And I remember hearing my friend who took the plunge, and that was the phrase that was used, and I remember Dr. Gilo Quasi Logan of Logan Consulting Services. He started his own company. And I remember having coffee with him about 4 years ago when I was thinking about this. And he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, I took the plunge and I haven't looked back. I don't regret it. And that's how I'm feeling about this. I mean, it is a hustle, I'm you don't know. The thing about consulting work, you have to be prepared for the fact that there might be a period of time where you are trying to get clients and you have no clients, and then could be another period where you're really get too many, too more than you can chew. So like it's a balancing act of getting those things. And but having said that, I love it because I get to do a little bit of everything that I'm passionate about. I get to teach and I get to coach, and I get to apply what we do as psychologists to folks that are not in psychology or folks that aren't necessarily directly looking for therapy. So I love all of that, about consulting.
So I didn't get to read the rest of the bio.
Mhm.
Rahul is also a musician. So how do you use music and integrate that into what you do?
Yeah. By the way, is it possible for me to share screen if I
Yes,
can?
absolutely.
Let me see if let me as I'm talking to you. So yeah, I have had a music group for almost 24 years now. And there are 10 people in the band, and we mix up Indian music with reggae and funk. It's quite a fun project. And let me try do this. This is actually um I did a leadership training for. Can folks see this?
Yep.
Okay. So, oh shoot, this is a you can't see this. So half the band is cut off in this picture because this is a PDF, I realized. Um, but there's 10 people in the band. Let me see if I can get a picture actually of the band. But we've been together almost 24 years, and I play bass guitar and sitar with the band. And we're Indian American, African American, Jamaican, Latino, European American folks in the band. Okay, here we go. I am going to. So now you can see in a second. Let me share screen. There's the group shot. Okay. So here's a picture of the band. You can see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So as you can see, we come from many different backgrounds, and I not only has this been a great, fun part of my life for and very enriching. In fact, I was in grad school when this band started. But I tell folks when I'm giving at a speaking engagement or whatever that I've learned a lot being the band leader of a group like this, where we've learned from each other, not just about music, but also about culture and relationship and identity and so many things. So so much so that when I'm going to share one more thing. Now I'm going to go back to that other picture. So if you look at the top right, whoops, wrong one. Hold on. Bear with me, folks. Uh, that should be it. Hold on. Nope, that's not it. That's weird how it's doing that. Now it should work. Now. So if you look at the top right of this picture, let me know if this works. That is me at in the middle of this circle. This is and the drummers are all around us. Like right there is one, our drummer Kwame from right here. This is another drummer. Rich is right there, and Carlos is somewhere back here. We do this. This was the board of directors for the Chicago Children's Museum. It was the advisory board, the executive board, and two other boards where they wanted to do a session on inclusive joy. And I proposed doing something where we're going to, and this is a signature, I'll stop share. This is a signature workshop that we have done a few times where we have everyone in the room with a drum, and we break into 4 different breakout rooms where someone's learning North Indian rhythms, Latin rhythms, West African rhythms, and Brazilian rhythms. And everyone's with their drum instructor for 15 minutes. Then we come back into the big room. We all try to play together. And then I make a joke and say, and also because I'm a psychologist, after we have this experience, we're going to talk about it. And I'll break people into pairs, and they'll turn to the person next to them and tie together the experience, the musical experience they had making multicultural music together, to the themes that I was just presenting on in the lecture on, emotional intelligence, cultural competence, diversity, equity, inclusion, all of that. So to me, it's very satisfying and enriching to be able to bring my musical self to my consulting work. Um, and I encourage anyone and everyone to figure out what it is that you're passionate about, either within the field or even other things, and find, are there any ways to tie together these different things that you're interested in into an activity that can be therapeutic, or that can be educational, or that can promote growth in a certain way. What helps for me to do those workshops is I went and got 4 days of training, because I'm a musician and I'm a therapist and a facilitator, but I never put those things together. So I went to Remo Drums and got the training on what they call their health rhythms protocol and their adolescent protocol, which is a method of teaching group process and facilitation through drumming. And now that I've got that certification, it made it that much more clear to take aspects of what I was trained in there and combine it with this band that I have, and use it in unique ways. So that's been a whole lot of fun and really enriching.
And it's I love the music. I've gone to a few of your shows, so I can vouch for it. So and I have all the CDs.
Awesome.
Are you guys gonna put out more CDs?
Yes, we're way overdue. That's the downside of having the band leader be a psychologist who is a consultant and a father and a husband. I'm sometimes not doing my due diligence in getting us to produce a newer album, but I'll tell everybody, no, we're artists, and we have to wait till we're inspired. But
There we go.
you want the real deal? It's like I'm spreading myself too thin.
The artists, you have different types of timetable, right?
That is totally true.
So can you tell us a little bit about some of your accomplishments that you feel could be an inspiration to students of psychology, recent graduates?
Accomplishments. I would say what was really nice was continuing my interest in violence against women prevention, and basically also how to just address issues related to violence against women in a culturally specific way. So I did my dissertation, this would have been back in 1998, on there was a treatment program in Vancouver that was specifically for South Asian men that were court ordered for treatment for spousal abuse. And I was fascinated to find out that it was specific to South Asian men, and that it was run by a South Asian man and a South Asian woman. And it was called the Assaultive Husbands Program. And it was run out of an immigrant settlement agency in Vancouver. So I did a qualitative case study of the program where I went out there, I observed groups, I interviewed men that were in the program, I interviewed men after they completed the program, I interviewed the two facilitators, and just looked at a lot of data that they were giving me. And I was driven by these questions. So what do we do when we, as in my case, as an Indian American in the field of clinical psychology, which is the way it's taught is a very Western focused model. I was driven by the question that when you're working South Asian practitioners with South Asian population, do you take the Western models and just apply it to this population? Do you do something hybrid where you kind of take aspects of your own cultural knowledge and you sort of shift some of the things that you're learning from Western psychology? Or do you just sort of chuck everything from Western psychology and say, well, we're going to do it our way? And the short answer is this: they were very crafty in doing a hybrid, where they took the Duluth model of batter intervention, which was a standard model, and they found ways to modify it. And like one example is, and I think it's similar with other Asian cultures, that with the men that were in treatment in a heterogeneous or a mainstream group that was run for any men in the United States or in Canada, by the time the men have gone through the court system and they're in treatment, 4 out of 5 men are divorced from their spouses. With the South Asian men, that number was flipped. 4 out of 5 men were still with their spouses. And we can think of different factors, including just culture and the idea of divorce, even in the face of something as serious as domestic violence. We can also think about things like fear for the husband and the wife of getting deported, and there needs to be this kind of symbiotic relationship. A lot of different factors. But what do you do as a South Asian practitioner when you're studying a model that's not based on people from your culture, but you have to sort of take that model and you have to do things to kind of adapt and think on your feet and think about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So I think I have never talked about that as an accomplishment, but I think taking that, and many years ago there was a book that came out, and I contributed a book chapter on South Asian men's roles in addressing domestic violence in our communities. So that's something that I'm proud of, and just this year, I'm going to be doing a book chapter for a book on South Asians in therapy and counseling, and the chapter that I'm co-writing with Nishi Konokolu, who's a good friend and colleague, is on South Asian gender socialization. So considerations about how we're socialized in terms of gender within our cultural context, and how that might impact how clinicians need to think about this. So those are a couple of things that come to mind that I feel like, again, it came from a specific question. And if I can, if you haven't picked this up already, I'm just sort of I go in there's many different stems where I go with my talking. What comes to mind is I really want to encourage folks to, especially younger folks or anybody, any age, to be confident earlier rather than later, to take risks earlier rather than later, and to not show up in any space feeling like your cultural identity is something that you kind of need to leave at the door. Because I feel like I've gained a lot more, because that band, the picture of the band that you saw, that would not have happened if it wasn't for me sort of being more bold in embracing my South Asian identity, and then wanting to get with other people that were into embracing their own cultural identities. So, and that dissertation and the book chapter wouldn't have happened if it didn't come from a kind of like a bold stance, like, hey, what is it that we have going on that isn't necessarily defined by a Western psychology model? So I encourage folks to, nurture your passion, nurture your curiosity, and don't feel like you need to sacrifice an aspect of what drives you, what makes you passionate, and the questions that you might have to ask, because not only is it something that you shouldn't leave at the door, but it might be a perspective that the field really is missing and that the field needs. So don't underestimate your value in what you might be able to contribute.
What do you feel as a person of color are some of the challenges. I don't know about you. I know I talk to a lot of Asian Pacific Americans. We grow up and it's always engineer, doctor, lawyer, whatever. But the fact that the prevalence of mental illness is fairly high in the Asian American population, especially with certain groups because of trauma, because of war. What do you think are some of the challenges of people like us going into the field?
Whoa, that's a great question.
A loaded question.
Well, there's a couple of different ways I could go about it. I think the challenge from is without making assumptions that this applies to everyone that I'm speaking to now. Um, there's a tendency for us because, and very much similar with Indian culture. Wait, you're not a doctor, you're not an engineer, you're not a lawyer. What are you doing? And I have a couple of funny anecdotes about that. Um, it can be a lonesome place to want to study this and to tell your family that you want to study this. And then it can be a doubly lonesome place to not get the understanding or support from some of your family or your community. Although I think that some of that's changing. I think I'm seeing more folks embracing and recognizing the need for, because there is a tremendous need for us to be better represented in our field, in the field of psychology. But there's also the alienation of, there's a good chance that there's not going to be a critical mass of Asian folk in, let's say, a grad program, that you're a clinical psychology graduate program. So those are challenges. And the way what helped me, and Mabel, you might be able to back this up, when I went to the Chicago school, we had the Spectrum Support Group, which is the group of students that of color. And so it wasn't just Asian students, but we had in common sort of, uh, these experiences of maybe being underestimated or overlooked or underrepresented, represented. And I believe that support is an important inoculant. That support is really key. But preparing for the fact that it might take some boldness, and then also there's imposter syndrome, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
not unique to Asians or not unique to people of color. But if you're female, if you are a person of color, if you are gay, lesbian, bisexual, if you are transgender, if there's so many ways in which imposter syndrome can get exacerbated, or there's and Claude Steele's work on stereotype threat is really key, where your performance actually can get diminished just by the awareness of the negative stereotypes about your group. When that's actually happening, it can make it that much more difficult for you to feel like, oh, wait a minute, I have something to contribute, or oh, wait a minute, I belong here. Richard Swin, when we were in grad school, Richard Swin came to visit, and he was, at that time, I believe he was the first Asian American candidate for president of the American Psychological Association. And I see this accomplished psychologist, Asian American psychologist, and he's giving a talk, and he's talking to, I think he was talking mainly to the students of color, one of the student color support groups at a restaurant near Dearborn Station. And he said that he struggles with imposter syndrome. And I'm thinking, wait, he struggles with imposter syndrome, but he's about to run for APA president, you know? So, but that was very, it was helpful to get behind the curtain, like expect that it might happen and find a way to overcome it because you belong. You need to affirm that you belong. And fast forward to 2006, 2000 in Seattle, I run into him and he was literally getting the Elders Ceremony Award at the Multicultural Summit, which is a beautiful way of saying, very cultural way of talking about the Lifetime Achievement Award. But at the Multicultural Summit that APA puts together, it was called the Elder Ceremony, and he was getting honored. And I pulled him aside and say, I don't know if you remember this, but 20 years ago, you came and talked, and you blew me away because you mentioned that you still had elements of imposter syndrome. And he looks at me and he goes, it still happens sometimes. So, again, it's not like he's plagued by it, but it's a tape that might just run, this idea of like, maybe I don't belong here. And what I'm suggesting for everyone is be bold, have confidence. And I'll give one more example of that confidence. When I was thinking of doing my dissertation, I was looking for people that were talking about culture and domestic violence and treating male batterers. And there was one name that kept going out, that kept coming out: Oliver Williams. Oliver Williams wrote about African American men who batter and the need to be, culturally competent with this population. My brother and I were driving from Chicago to Montana, just on this long road trip. So we're passing through Minneapolis, and St. Paul, Minneapolis is where Oliver Williams was teaching. So, and we didn't, this was what, 96. So, we didn't have cell phones or anything, but I contacted him and, I said, would you be willing to, meet me at Starbucks, or was there Starbucks, whatever, a coffee shop. And, he was willing to meet with me, and one thing led to another. He basically joined my dissertation committee. So he was the third member on my dissertation committee. And I was so honored, but it took a little bit of like brazenness or guts on my part to just say, hey, let me reach out to this person. So that's another tidbit that I would share with folks is if there's somebody that you want to mentor you, don't be afraid to reach out. If somebody, they'll give you indications if they don't have the time or whatever, but you'd be surprised by how many people that you really look up to are willing and interested in investing time in you. So I think developing a mentoring relationship, or there's a concept of poly mentoring, which is, you might have different mentors that satisfy different needs of yours. But I would suggest doing that.
Let's talk a little bit about diversity, because that is kind of like the buzzword right now. I mean, not that it's a bad thing, but how do we leverage that when we are still seen as, especially Asian Americans, a lot of times we're still seen as foreigners. We still either that or the model minority. So what are some of your thoughts about diversity and how that helps or hinders us?
I have about 1,000 things to say. So let me just choose a couple. The first thing that comes to mind is just to think about the history of the buzzwords, because I think diversity has been with us for a long time. And then, at least in corporate settings, and I think it's gone, across various industries, it's become, there's been an evolution. Okay, diversity is just about the numbers. If we diversity, okay, let's attract more people of color for our organization. So we're just going to add diversity. We're going to, we have found that doesn't necessarily transform a system or a culture, because you're adding diversity, let's say, amongst the student body, but what's the diversity of the faculty? What's the diversity of the administration? Or in a company, what's the diversity of the leadership and the board of directors? So there's that kind of almost like more superficial or cosmetic diversity. I don't want to minimize the importance of, a diverse body of people, but it's not enough when we think about diversity in of itself. So they added this idea, diversity and inclusion. Inclusion being this idea of, well, there's an environment where you actually feel like you're a part of it. So then it was diversity and inclusion. We're going to talk about D&I. The corporate world loves these, abbreviations. D&I initiatives. And then folks are like, well, even inclusion is kind of more about like this feeling of belonging, but how do we create this of equity? So then it was diversity, equity, and inclusion, or equity, diversity, and inclusion. So, but the standard has been DEI. So DEI work, that's the latest buzzword: diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there's the history of that terminology. In terms of some of what you were asking, Mabel, there's so many ways to go about it. We need to create space to talk about our lived experiences. You mentioned the model minority myth. You talked about other stereotypes that we might face as Asian Americans. And the climate of our culture currently is such that we're really focusing a lot, and I believe as we should be, on the level of anti-Blackness in our country and in the world. And I don't know how many people listening right now have seen this. I don't, I've always known, it's a complicated relationship between being Asian American, not being white, and also not being Black in a country where, we're talking about the genocide of Native Americans and the enslavement of Black people, and post-slavery, all of the levels of oppression that continue to happen to Black people. And where do Asians fit into all of this? And I think there's been an evolution in our understanding of that as well, where if we're just focused on us as Asians and what it is that, hey, we don't want to get left behind. I think that's in terms of what we experience as people of color, but our experiences are different from Latinos. Our experiences are different from African Americans. It's important to have that voice, and it's also important to see how this whole system, works together. So I believe that the system of white supremacy sometimes has historically this isn't my belief, this is from what I've learned and I agree with, is that we have been to some degree used. You look at the the 1965 Immigration Act and who came in amongst Asian Americans, right? Used as a weapon against Black America. Like, why can't you be more like these, people as opposed to those people, part of what I'm saying is, I'm happy to see a critical, I shouldn't say critical mass, much more folks within Asian American communities unpacking anti-Blackness in our own community, being real and understanding that even though we are people of color, we really buy into and sometimes, perpetuate this idea of, well, Black folks are the lowest on the totem pole, and through stereotypes and through other mechanisms, we sort of help. We're complicit in that, and so we have our own stuff within our community around that. Or colorism, which is very much, when you think about it, very much tied to anti-Blackness.
Mm-hmm.
So I do also believe that we need to create spaces where we can talk about all of this. I don't think our issues as Asian Americans should be left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for us to have spaces to have voice about what we experience. And at the same time, I believe that we need to be a part of a larger conversation around justice, where we're not just looking for us, issues that affect us and our people, but we really join hands in solidarity with folks that might experience different aspects of racism and the like. Um, those are a couple of things that come to mind. I don't know if I'm again answering
Yeah,
what.
because I want to tie this back to a career in psychology, because we do have to be mindful of what's going on outside in the real world, and what part we play as a mental health service provider professional.
Mhm.
Do you see do you see if there are obstacles because we're Asian Americans in a field that is not that traditional for us, and also because, as you're probably aware, a lot of the research kind of excludes data from Asian Americans, because it's like, because we're still, I mean, it's a growing population, but it's still fairly small compared to the Black community, compared to the Latino community. So a lot of the data, a lot of are still whites and blacks, or if they're generous, they include Latinos, Asian. So how can we make sure that, because in the field of psychology, we still need to be part of the conversation. So what are some of the obstacles or challenges you see for us?
Mm. Yeah, being rendered invisible, being overlooked, not being considered. There's that evolution of the term people of color, right? POC to BIPOC,
Mhm.
Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And I think that cuts a couple of different ways, where um, on the one hand, you might have a space for people of color, and you go to the space and somebody will say, well, we're all the Black people. All the non-Black people of color are getting together. And is there a way that we're not making this as welcoming a space for Black folks, right? Or Indigenous folks? And then there's the flip side, which is, someone might be talking about people of color, in terms of, I don't know, hiring, or in terms of a population, but they're really just talking about Black people, right? And again, us as Asian Americans and maybe other groups are sort of just not being considered. I've been at faculty meetings as a faculty member where, somebody kept using the word person of color and Black, like, back and forth, and I just felt like, well, what am I, like, where, so I feel like that's an obstacle, to your point, Mabel, about like when we're not as represented numbers wise, is this, and people aren't where they should be in terms of their cultural awareness and responsiveness, that we end up just getting sidelined once again, getting rendered invisible. So I think being organized and having an active voice is really important. And by the way, tied to that, I forgot to mention that, and I don't know if we got to this in the bio, but I was um, part of the division of on South Asian Americans. I was served a 3-year term, and as the chair, um, and that's a part of the Asian American Psychological Association, and it's a great organization. They just had their online session this last weekend, I want to say. But usually, when APA meets in August,
Mhm.
the Asian American Psychological Association will meet a day ahead of time in August. But I encourage everybody, because they really welcome students and folks at all levels to be a part of it. I encourage folks. I think it's aapaonline.org, but just look up Asian American Psychological Association, and if you're part of this field, I think you should join. You should look up and see what's there. um Having Asian American mentors, I think, is really important,
Mhm.
and but being connected to folks that are in prominent positions within the field of psychology, it really helps. Daryl Wing Sue, Stanley Sue, um, I mentioned Richard Swin, Kevin Nadal, Filipino American, who I had the pleasure of, the Illinois Psych Association. I did the morning keynote, and he did the afternoon keynote. And he's a friend of mine, and great guy. But he's doing seminal work and on microaggressions and more. But I think being connected to organizations like that is
Mhm.
really important.
Do you feel that because the field of psychology is not a traditional career path for Asian Americans, do you feel that it's kind of limiting people into thinking, no, that's not for me, because they don't see others like them being in the field doing that kind of work? Because I mean, like for example, what
Yes.
I do is, yeah, I work for social service agency. We work with people with severe and chronic mental illness. But I think out of over 200 clients, we have one Asian American.
Mhm. Yeah, it's always disheartening when we're not represented, and and it's somewhat of a cyclical or self-fulfilling prophecy. If Well, the less people see that we're in this field, the less likely folks that look like us are going to want to enter this field.
Right.
I think some of us are trying to flip the script on that. Kevin Nadal, who I mentioned, and isn't just doing this with Asian Americans, has this whole thing, hashtag, this is what a professor looks like. And it's showing diverse professors in various roles, doing different things, which I think is great. Um, 2 months ago, I was able to join Ali Matu and Ulash Dunlap Thakur Dunlap, who are both South Asian, and the three of us did a panel together on self care and coping skills in the era of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and that was remarkable to have an all South Asian panel that was hosted by the Division on South Asian Americans. Uh, and I know it meant a lot to the students and colleagues that were on the Zoom call, just just to see a whole lot of South Asian faces, and everyone was, and not just, it wasn't just South Asians, but primarily South Asians. Um, to to see yourself represented,
Mm-hmm. Right.
or when a colleague of mine brought in Usha Tumala Nara, who's a great South Asian theorist and academic, literally written a book on multicultural approaches, perspectives on psychoanalysis. And really, as someone who's interested in psychodynamic thinking, she is, Freudian and post-Freudian thinking, that she's really carrying the torch of making sure that folks that are practicing that strain of psychology are really thinking about cultural competence. But she spoke at the Illinois school where I was teaching, and the talk was great. What I was most struck by were the handful of South Asian students that I said, you should come to this session, how they just needed to talk with her afterwards. Like, I could just feel what it meant to see a
Mhm.
prominent South Asian woman within the field making her mark, and so I think seek it out and or become it. Just carve it out for yourself. You know, in terms of, like, leadership and representation. Um, and I think promoting destigmatizing mental health
Mhm.
within our communities is really important. Um, by the way, some of the outreach programs that I like to suggest uh, doing and tying in mental health is, what if you screened a movie? What if we screened Crazy Rich Asians, or we screened, what is the Aquafina movie that she,
Farewell.
yeah. And what if there was something on aging and elderly issues or whatever, but you did it by screen? I mean, again, we're in a COVID era, so this might be, the Zoom version of that.
Mhm.
But what if you offered something that was more less threatening and more palatable to the community? We're going to do a movie and a discussion.
Mhm.
But through the discussion, you're able to actually bring out, some mental health, psychoeducational issues or
Mhm.
concerns. Um, I did that when I was in grad school. I won't. I'm aware of the time, so I won't get into it. But doing a variety of creative activities where you can engage folks. I do want to leave time. I don't know if there's
Yeah, I'm
questions.
not seeing any questions on Zoom because I know there are people watching on Facebook.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't know if they're able to ask questions, and I'm not on
Well,
the
feel
Facebook
free
Live right
to.
now.
I'm gonna. Yeah, if you're watching. By the way, can Facebook folks see the chat if I write to on the chat?
Um, I don't think so.
Okay.
But what I
Well,
can do is, if you want, I can share your contact information on our Facebook page.
mhm,
That way, if they want to
absolutely.
contact you, they can.
Yeah, and let me just say, I would be very interested in answering questions if folks have any questions. If you have any now and you happen to be watching on Zoom, put it in the chat. Otherwise, my you see my name on here. My email is Rahul Sharma PsyD, so the degree PSYD, Rahul Sharma PSYD at gmail.com.
Let me
But yeah, you can also follow up with folks with
Rahul
with
Sharma. I know I have it, but
yeah,
Rahul Sharma Saidi, right?
at gmail.com.
Yeah, I know I have that. So, um, yeah, we have 3 more minutes. So, any word of wisdom? Final,
All right, I got it.
final
I
word of
got you. I got you. So we already talked about confidence. Have it earlier rather than later. Don't feel like you need to sacrifice an aspect of your identity. There's something that I'd like to bring to the table, which is my chai recipe. Oh, looks like somebody. Oh, good. Thank you. So I share with folks, and I do this in a variety of settings, my chai recipe, which, by the way, I can make a great cup of chai, but right now I'm talking about an acronym, which is chai, standing for compassion, humility, accountability, and insistence. And I often talk about this when talking about diversity, social justice issues, that when we interact with each other, we need to be compassionate, we need to be empathic. Humility, I think, is a really important one, where we are showing deference and respect by saying, well, I'm not coming at you from a holier than thou position. I consider myself a lifelong learner. And so I want to come at you with some humility. Accountability, I think about intent versus impact, how we might have great intentions, but are we aware of how we're experienced by other people, the impact that we have on other people? So can we be accountable to the impact that we have on someone else? Doesn't mean we have to take on their experience of us or their definition of us, but at least can we leave room for, even though I said something a certain way, somebody might have heard it or somebody might have experienced a certain way. Can I hold myself accountable if there's something that I have to learn from that? And the last one is insistence. It's great to be compassionate, great to be humble, great to hold yourself accountable. But the insistence is, if I'm getting, to Mabel's point earlier, if I'm getting overlooked or sidelined, or if someone else I see is getting pushed to the side, or there's issues that aren't being addressed, the insistence is saying, as long as I'm coming with those other value sets, it's really important for me to speak up, to address something that needs to be addressed, to not let something go if it's in the best interest of, having a more equitable, just environment or society. So, Chai, compassion, humility, accountability, insistence.
That's a good one. That's easy to remember. All right, so we've come to an end of today's Zoom session. Thank you, Rahul. And for those of you who joined late, I don't know if you caught the earlier presentation with Amelia from the Illinois Department of Human Services. So we will have a longer session on November 6th, starting at 2 p.m. So go to our Facebook page and you'll be able to see all the details regarding that event. And she will give us a little bit more detail on career opportunities with the Department of Human Services. So with that, I am going to end today's call, and thank you, Rahul. Hopefully see you in person soon.
That would be great. Thank you, Mabel, so much. And thanks, everyone. I really enjoyed this.